Mail order bride rejected for her red hair. One cowboy said she burned brighter than the sun. Clara had never seen so many landscapes pass by in such a short time. The train rattled along the tracks, carrying her away from the only home she had ever known. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and watched the fields stretch out endlessly, dotted with occasional clusters of trees, farms, and small towns. The wind rushed past, bringing smells of earth, hay, and distant smoke from chimneys. It was exciting, but it also made her stomach twist with nervousness. This journey was not just a trip, it was a leap into an entirely new life. Clara was leaving behind her family, the small village she had grown up in, and everything familiar to her, all for a chance to marry a man she had never met, a man who had chosen her from pictures and letters because she was supposed to be his bride. Her parents had hugged her tightly before she left, their faces full of hope and worry. Her mother had whispered, "Be brave, Clara. Show them who you are, no matter what they think." Her father had patted her shoulder and said nothing, but his eyes had glistened with unshed tears. Clara had promised them she would be careful, but she also promised herself that she would not let fear guide her. Her fiery red hair, which everyone in her village had always admired, would not be hidden, and her spirit would not be dimmed. She had always been proud of the bright, almost glowing color of her hair, but as she traveled west, she wondered if it might bring her trouble. The town she arrived in was dusty and small, with wooden buildings lining the main street. Horses tied to posts clopped their hooves as people went about their daily business. Clara stepped off the train with her modest trunk in hand, taking a deep breath of the dry air. Everything smelled different here. The air was sharp and hot under the noon sun, and the chatter of strangers filled the streets with a rhythm she didn't know yet. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder and walked toward the address she had been given, her heart beating faster with every step. When she reached the ranch, she saw a large wooden house surrounded by a low fence and open fields. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, and the sound of cattle lowing could be heard in the distance. Clara's excitement surged again. This was it, the place where she might start her new life, where she might finally have a home of her own. She straightened her back, smoothed her dress, and knocked on the door, her hands trembling slightly. A man opened the door. He was taller than she expected, with broad shoulders and a face hardened by years of work under the sun. His eyes looked her over in silence, lingering on her hair. Clara's heart sank slightly under the intensity of his gaze. She had imagined that her arrival would be met with warm smiles, gentle words, and a welcoming handshake. Instead, she felt a strange weight in the air, a kind of hesitation that she could not yet understand. The man spoke finally, his voice neutral but firm. "You must be Clara. I was told you were coming." Clara nodded, smiling politely, trying to hide her nerves. "Yes, sir." "I am Clara. It's so good to finally meet you." She held out her hand, but the man did not take it immediately. He looked at her again, and then, to her shock, he shook his head slightly. "I don't think this will work," he said. "Your hair, it's too bright." Clara blinked. She had heard rejection before, of course, but never for something so personal, so intrinsic to her being. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her heart ached as she realized that her pride, the very thing that had defined her for her entire life, was being judged as a fault. She had always thought her hair was beautiful, fiery, alive, bold. But here, in this new place, it was considered strange, even unacceptable. The man's expression softened slightly, but the words were final. "I'm sorry, I can't accept you. Perhaps you should find somewhere else." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She had traveled so far, endured so much uncertainty, and now this. The sun seemed harsher, the shadows longer, and her chest felt tight with disappointment. She turned slowly, holding her head high as best she could, and left the ranch. The sound of her boots on the dry ground echoed in her ears, a stark reminder of her solitude. She wandered down the main street, dragging her small trunk behind her, unsure of where to go. People glanced at her as she passed, some with curiosity, some with barely concealed amusement. Clara could feel their eyes on her hair, on her red curls that seemed almost to catch fire in the sunlight. She had always stood out in her village, and here it seemed she stood out even more. Her heart ached with loneliness, but she refused to let it defeat her. She reminded herself of her mother's words, "Be brave, show them who you are." Eventually, Clara found herself in front of a small inn. The wooden sign creaked in the wind, and the door looked welcoming enough. She entered, the cool shade a relief from the relentless sun. Inside, the smell of baked bread and coffee filled her senses, giving her a small comfort. She approached the innkeeper, a kind-looking woman with a warm smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," Clara said softly. I need a place to stay. I just arrived in town and I don't know anyone." The innkeeper studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You look like you've had a long journey," she said. "We have a room available. You can stay as long as you need." Relief washed over Clara like a wave. For the first time since leaving the train, she felt a tiny spark of hope. She thanked the woman and paid what little money she had, then took her trunk up the narrow staircase to the room she would call her own for the next few days. Alone in the small, quiet room, Clara sat by the window and let the events of the day settle around her. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror and touched her hair gently. It was still the same vibrant red, still bold and beautiful. She realized that no matter what anyone said, this part of her could not and would not be hidden. She had traveled so far not to change who she was, but to find a place where she could belong, where someone could see her for all that she was. That night, as she lay on the narrow bed, Clara allowed herself to cry quietly. It was a release, a way to shed the fear and disappointment that had built up inside her. But after the tears, she felt a quiet strength rising within her. She reminded herself that this was only the beginning of her journey. She would not give up. She would find someone who could see past the color of her hair, someone who could see her courage, her kindness, her heart. And maybe, just maybe, that person was out there, waiting. The next morning, Clara stepped out of the inn and onto the dusty street once more. She held her head high, adjusted her dress, and let the sun shine down on her red hair without shame. The day was full of possibilities, and she refused to let yesterday's rejection define her. Each step she took was a step toward a future she would shape herself, a future where her light could shine brightly, no matter what anyone else thought. For Clara, the world was wide, the possibilities endless, and her journey had only just begun. Every stranger's glance, every whispered comment, every dusty street and wooden building became a part of her story. And in the heart of that small frontier town, Clara began to learn what it truly meant to be brave, to be herself, and to keep moving forward, even when the path ahead was uncertain. Clara woke early the next morning, the sun spilling golden light through the small window of her room. The town outside was slowly coming to life. Horses trotted down the main street, vendors set up their carts, and the smell of fresh bread drifted through the air. Clara stretched and took a deep breath. She had survived her first day, and though it had been filled with disappointment, she felt a quiet determination building inside her. Today, she would do more than exist. She would find a way to make her place in this town. After breakfast, Clara decided to visit the general store at the center of town. She had noticed it on her first day and thought it might be a good place to find work, or at least learn the lay of the land. The store was a wooden building with large windows, filled with shelves stacked with jars, sacks, and barrels. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, announcing her presence. A middle-aged man behind the counter looked up and smiled faintly. "Good morning," he said. "Can I help you?" "Yes, sir," Clara replied politely. "I just arrived in town and I'm hoping to find work. Do you need help here?" The man studied her for a moment, his eyes lingering on her bright red hair, which seemed to glow under the sunlight streaming through the windows. "Well," he said slowly, "we could use someone to help stock shelves, sweep the floor, and assist customers." Clara's face lit up. "I would be happy to do that," she said eagerly. Over the next few days, Clara settled into her new routine. She rose early, helped with chores at the inn, and walked to the store to assist with work. She learned to stack heavy sacks of flour, measure sugar and coffee for customers, and even mend small items when needed. Though the work was hard and her muscles ached at the end of the day, Clara found satisfaction in knowing she was earning her own keep. She had never been afraid of labor, but here it felt meaningful. Each task completed made her feel a little stronger, a little more confident. Despite her growing independence, Clara could not escape the whispers and curious stares of the townspeople. Some were kind, offering greetings and small smiles, but others snickered behind their hands, whispering about her hair and her unusual arrival. At first, Clara felt a sting of embarrassment and insecurity. She had always been proud of her red hair, but in this town, it seemed to mark her as different, as something to be judged. One afternoon, as she carried sacks of grain to the back of the store, a group of women paused near the counter. Clara heard them speaking quietly, but she could catch bits of the conversation. "That red-haired girl, she's so bold," one said. "I've never seen hair like that before. It almost burns in the sun." Another added, "Do you think she'll stay? She doesn't seem like she belongs here." Clara's cheeks warmed, and for a moment she felt a wave of doubt. But she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here. She was not here to conform nor to hide. She was here to live, to work, and to find her place. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and continued with her tasks. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Clara began to win the respect of those around her. The innkeeper praised her for her reliability and gentle manner with guests. The store owner noticed how carefully she handled each task and how politely she treated every customer, even the grumpy ones. Small acts of kindness also began to spread her reputation. She helped a sick child by fetching herbs from the apothecary, offered water to the elderly during hot afternoons, and even assisted with a lost calf that had wandered into the town square. Each act, though seemingly small, quietly built trust and admiration among the townspeople. Despite her progress, loneliness was a constant companion. Even with the work and the small moments of recognition, Clara felt the ache of being far from home and family. She missed the comfort of her mother's embrace, the quiet evenings in her village, and the familiar rhythm of a life she once knew. Nights were particularly hard, when the inn grew silent, and she could only hear the wind rustling through the trees outside. She would sit by the window, brushing her hair or writing letters she never sent, and dream of a day when she would feel truly at home. One evening, as Clara returned from the store, she noticed a group of children playing near the town square. Their laughter rang out in the cool evening air, and something about it made her smile. She paused and watched them, feeling a warmth in her chest. Slowly, she realized that this town, with all its dust, gossip, and challenges, was beginning to feel less like a place of judgment and more like a place of possibility. She could carve a life here, one small step at a time. The next day, Clara faced another small challenge. A traveling merchant arrived in town, bringing goods from distant cities. People gathered around to inspect the items, and Clara, curious, joined the crowd. As she examined the colorful fabrics and shiny trinkets, she noticed the merchant looking at her intently. "Your hair," he said, his voice full of curiosity. "It's like fire. I've never seen anything like it." Clara felt a small thrill of pride. Here was someone who did not see her as odd, but as striking unique. She smiled politely and thanked him, feeling a little more confident in herself. Work continued to fill her days, but Clara also began to explore the surrounding countryside when she had free moments. She walked along the dirt roads, visited small farms, and observed the wildlife. She learned the names of birds, the shapes of clouds, and the rhythm of the land. Each walk brought her a sense of peace and a connection to a world larger than herself. She discovered hidden streams where the water ran cool and clear, and she would often stop there to rest, letting the sunlight warm her shoulders and listening to the gentle murmur of flowing water. These moments of solitude were precious, allowing her to gather strength and reflect on the life she wanted to build. Slowly, Clara's efforts began to bear fruit. The townspeople who had once whispered began to nod in greeting as she passed. Some even smiled warmly, recognizing her dedication and kindness. The children waved when they saw her, and occasionally a neighbor would ask for help with a task, trusting her judgment and skill. Clara felt a quiet joy in these small signs of acceptance. Though she was far from family and had faced rejection, she was creating a place for herself, one step at a time. During these weeks, Clara also discovered her own resilience. She realized that she could face hardship without breaking, that her courage and determination were stronger than any insult or challenge. She learned to rise early, work tirelessly, and meet each day with optimism, even when it was hard. Each act of perseverance built her confidence and made her feel more in control of her destiny. She was no longer just a traveler seeking acceptance. She was a woman shaping her own life, earning respect through her actions and integrity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Clara stood at the edge of the town and looked out over the fields. The wind played with her red hair, and she felt a profound sense of possibility. She thought of the future of the home she would make, the people she would meet, and the life she would live. Though her journey had begun with rejection and loneliness, it was slowly turning into a story of courage, growth, and hope. Clara returned to the inn with a lighter heart. She knew that challenges would continue to come, that some people might never accept her, and that loneliness would sometimes return. But she also knew that she had the strength to face these challenges and the wisdom to find beauty and opportunity even in difficult moments. She was no longer just the girl who had been rejected for her hair. She was Clara, the woman who had crossed states, faced judgment, and begun to build a life with her own hands. And so life in the small town continued. Clara worked diligently at the store, helped neighbors, and explored the countryside. She learned the rhythms of the town, the patterns of work and rest, and the small joys that made each day meaningful. Each step she took was a step toward belonging, toward building a home in a place that had once felt foreign and unwelcoming. She embraced every moment, knowing that each act of courage, kindness, and perseverance was shaping her into the woman she was meant to be. By the end of those first few months, Clara had transformed. She had found ways to survive, to thrive, and to carve out her own space in a world that had initially seemed unkind. The whispers and stares of strangers no longer held power over her. She walked through the town with her head held high, her red hair shining in the sunlight, a symbol of her uniqueness and resilience. Clara knew that the journey ahead would still hold challenges, but she was ready to face them. She had discovered something far more valuable than acceptance. She had discovered herself. Clara's days had begun to settle into a rhythm. She worked at the general store, helped the townspeople whenever she could, and explored the countryside in her free time. She had gained a quiet respect from many of the townsfolk, and for the first time since leaving home, she felt a sense of belonging. Yet, despite all this, she still carried a quiet longing in her heart. She had learned to be strong and independent, but there was a part of her that longed for connection, someone who could see her as she truly was, and not just as the red-haired girl who had arrived by train. One warm afternoon, as Clara walked along a dusty path leading to the fields, she noticed a lone figure on horseback. He was a man with broad shoulders and a strong posture, riding a horse that moved with calm precision. Clara paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and watched him as he guided the horse toward the river that ran along the edge of the ranchland. There was something about the way he carried himself, quiet and confident, that made her heart skip a beat. She had seen many men in town, but none seemed so calm, so at ease in their own skin. The man noticed her watching and gave a small nod. Clara returned it politely and continued on her way, but her curiosity lingered. Over the next few days, she began to see him more often. He worked alone on his ranch, tending to the fields, repairing fences, and caring for the cattle. She watched from a distance, impressed by his skill and the quiet strength he seemed to exude. The townspeople called him Jacob. No one spoke much about him, as he had always been a solitary figure, preferring his land to the chatter of the town. But Clara found herself drawn to him, wondering who he really was beneath the rugged exterior. One evening, Clara carried a basket of fresh bread and pies to deliver to a neighbor on the outskirts of town. As she crossed the open field, she spotted Jacob struggling to repair a broken fence near his ranch. The wooden post had splintered, and the wire was tangled in a mess. Clara hesitated for a moment, then walked toward him. "Good evening," she called softly. "Do you need some help?" Jacob looked up, surprised. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I could use an extra hand," he said. "Thank you." Clara set down her basket and stepped closer. Together they untangled the wire, lifted the heavy posts, and repaired the fence. Jacob worked methodically, his hands skilled and precise, while Clara followed his instructions, learning quickly. Though it was hard work, Clara felt a thrill in working alongside him. His presence was comforting, and she sensed a quiet respect in the way he allowed her to contribute without judgment. When the work was done, they stood back to admire the repaired fence. The sun was setting, casting warm golden light over the fields and painting Jacob's features with soft shadows. He looked at Clara and said, "You work hard and you do it well. Not many people would offer to help a stranger like that." Clara smiled, feeling her cheeks warm. "I believe in helping whenever I can," she replied. "It feels good to contribute." From that evening onward, Clara and Jacob began to cross paths more frequently. Sometimes she would meet him while gathering water from the river, other times while walking along the dirt roads of the town. Each encounter was brief but meaningful, a few shared words, a small smile, a growing familiarity. Clara felt a flutter in her chest whenever she saw him, though she tried to keep it quiet. She had faced rejection before and had learned to guard her heart, but there was something about Jacob that felt safe, someone she could trust. One day, Jacob invited Clara to help him with a particularly challenging task, moving hay bales from the field to the barn. Clara hesitated at first, unsure if she could manage the heavy work, but Jacob's calm encouragement gave her confidence. Together, they lifted, stacked, and arranged the hay, working side by side. Clara realized that she enjoyed not just the physical work, but the quiet companionship, the sense of being useful and appreciated. Jacob never treated her as weak or fragile. Instead, he recognized her strength and determination, which made her feel proud and valued. As the days passed, their conversations grew longer. They spoke of the land, of animals, of the changing seasons. Jacob told stories of the challenges of ranch life, of nights spent alone in the fields, and of storms that had tested his courage. Clara shared stories of her village, her family, and her journey west. She spoke of the rejection she had faced and the struggles of finding her place in this new town. Jacob listened with patience, never interrupting, his eyes steady and thoughtful. Clara felt a sense of relief in speaking openly with him, a trust she had not felt with anyone else. One afternoon, as they worked together near the river, Clara noticed how the sunlight caught his hair and the lines of his face, and she felt a sudden warmth in her chest. Jacob paused in his work and looked at her. "Clara," he said quietly, "you have a spirit that shines brighter than most. You face so much and yet you keep moving forward. That's rare. I admire it." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She looked down at her hands, which were rough from work but steady, and then back at him. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot to me." From that moment, a new closeness began to form. They began sharing more moments together, sometimes sitting by the river after a long day, watching the water flow and the birds fly overhead. They laughed at small jokes, shared thoughts about the future, and even helped each other with the work on the ranch. Jacob taught Clara how to ride a horse more confidently, how to mend fences with skill, and how to read the weather from the clouds. Clara, in turn, brought energy, curiosity, and a fresh perspective to the tasks, which Jacob quietly appreciated. One evening, after a long day of repairing the barn roof, they sat together on the hill overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known since leaving home. She turned to Jacob, who was watching the sunset in silence, and said, "I never thought I could feel so calm, so at home, in a place I once thought I'd never belong." Jacob smiled faintly. "It's the land, yes," he said, "but it's also the people. And maybe some people make a place feel like home, even when everything else is unfamiliar." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet understanding that Jacob was speaking about more than just the land. She realized that slowly but surely he had become someone important in her life, someone whose presence brought comfort, safety, and a spark of hope. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, but with Jacob, she began to feel seen, understood, and valued. As weeks turned into months, Clara and Jacob continued to grow closer. They worked together, shared meals, explored the countryside, and slowly, a bond formed that went beyond friendship. Clara felt herself opening up, sharing her thoughts and dreams, her fears and hopes. Jacob listened and encouraged, never judging, always supporting. The townspeople began to notice their connection, whispering about how the red-haired girl and the lone cowboy seemed inseparable. But Clara did not care about their opinions. She had learned to trust her own heart. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue and stars began to twinkle, Jacob spoke softly to Clara. "You know, there's something about you, something that stands out. Your courage, your kindness, and yes, your hair. It burns brighter than the sun itself." Clara laughed softly, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and joy. "I've always been told my hair is unusual," she admitted, "but I never thought it could mean anything more than that." Jacob reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It's more than unusual," he said. "It's a part of who you are, and it's beautiful, just like you." In that moment, Clara felt a deep sense of happiness, a warmth that filled her chest and made her heart beat faster. For the first time since arriving in this town, she felt truly seen, not just for her hair or her work or her kindness, but for the whole person she was. She realized that her journey had not been in vain. The rejection she had faced, the loneliness she had endured, and the struggles she had overcome had all led her to this point. to someone who recognized her light, who valued her spirit, and who made her feel at home. From that day forward, Clara and Jacob became inseparable. They worked together, laughed together, and shared quiet moments in the beauty of the land around them. Clara no longer felt like the outsider who had arrived by train. She had found a place and a person where she could be herself without fear or hesitation. And in the warmth of Jacob's presence, she began to dream of a future full of love, partnership, and belonging. Clara's life had begun to feel full in a way she had never imagined. Her days were busy, her hands roughened from work, and her heart lighter than it had been in months. She and Jacob had grown close through their shared work and quiet conversations, and now there was an unspoken understanding between them, a trust and comfort that made each day brighter. Clara still remembered the sting of rejection she had faced when she first arrived in town, but those memories seemed distant now, softened by the warmth of belonging. The town itself had started to accept her more fully. While whispers and curious stares still occasionally followed her down the dusty streets, they were fewer than before. People noticed the way she worked tirelessly at the store and how she helped neighbors without complaint. Children ran to greet her as she walked by, and even the older townspeople nodded with respect. Clara had discovered that persistence and kindness could change perceptions, and slowly, the town that had once seemed so unwelcoming began to feel like a home. Jacob was a constant part of that new home. Each morning, he would ride out to the fields, and Clara often joined him, helping with chores and learning more about ranch life. She became skilled with the tools of the trade, learning to mend fences, guide the horses, and carry out the daily tasks that kept the ranch running smoothly. Jacob admired her determination and resilience, often noting how quickly she adapted and how strong she had become. He had spent years living alone, relying only on himself, but now he found joy in their shared work, and Clara's laughter and energy seemed to breathe life into even the toughest days. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a section of fencing damaged by a recent storm, Jacob paused and looked at Clara. "You know," he said, "I've faced storms and harsh winters alone, and I thought I could handle anything. But working with you, it makes even the hardest tasks easier." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I feel the same," she said. "It's not just the work, it's knowing someone is here with me, someone I can rely on, someone who understands." As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. They shared meals under the shade of the trees, talked late into the evening, and sometimes sat quietly, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known before, and she realized that Jacob had become more than just a friend or companion. He had become someone she could trust completely, someone whose presence made her feel safe and valued. However, life on the ranch was not without challenges. One morning, after a long period of rain, they discovered that part of the barn roof had collapsed. The hay inside was wet and heavy, and some of the fences were damaged from the storm. Clara and Jacob worked tirelessly to repair the damage, carrying wet hay and hammering broken boards. The work was exhausting, and at times Clara's arms ached and her back burned. Yet through it all, they worked together, supporting each other with quiet encouragement and teamwork. During these moments, Clara saw a new side of Jacob. He was patient and steady, never allowing frustration to take over. He guided her when she struggled and praised her when she succeeded. She realized that his strength was not just physical but also emotional. He faced difficulties calmly and faced every challenge with a level head and a kind heart. Clara felt proud to work alongside him, learning from his example and discovering her own inner strength. Evenings were a time of relaxation and reflection. After the hard work of the day, they would sit together by the fire, sharing stories or simply enjoying the quiet. Sometimes they would walk along the river, letting the water flow over their boots and talk about dreams for the future. Clara began to imagine a life where she and Jacob worked together, built a home, and shared joy and companionship. For the first time since arriving in the town, she allowed herself to hope, not just for acceptance, but for happiness, love, and belonging. The townspeople began to notice the growing closeness between Clara and Jacob. At first, there were whispers and curious glances, but soon, people began to respect the bond they shared. Neighbors offered help with chores when they saw the two working together, and even the previously skeptical townspeople began to greet Clara warmly. It was a small but meaningful sign that their relationship was not only recognized, but accepted. Clara felt a quiet pride in knowing that her actions, her work, and her kindness had helped her earn the town's trust. One day, as they were riding through the fields checking on the cattle, Jacob spoke softly. "Clara, you've changed my life," he said. "I've been alone for so long, and I thought I would always be, but you've brought something into my life I didn't know I was missing. You make this place brighter, warmer, better." Clara felt her heart swell. She had longed for connection, for someone who could see her for who she truly was, and now, with Jacob, she had found it. "I feel the same," she said, her voice gentle. "I never imagined I could feel so at home somewhere I didn't know, but you've helped me see that home isn't just a place. It's the people you care about." As the seasons changed, their partnership grew stronger. They celebrated small victories together: the harvest, a well-repaired fence, a healthy herd, and faced challenges side by side. When a neighbor's cow went missing or a storm threatened the town, they worked together to help, showing courage, resourcefulness, and teamwork. Through these shared experiences, Clara and Jacob discovered that their bond was built not just on attraction or admiration, but on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Clara's confidence blossomed. She no longer worried about her hair or her appearance as much as she once had. She knew that Jacob valued her for who she was, and that knowledge gave her a sense of freedom. She could be herself, strong, independent, kind, and capable, without fear of judgment. Her journey of rejection and struggle had led her to this point, and she embraced it fully, recognizing that her past hardships had prepared her for this happiness. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, they sat together on the porch of Jacob's cabin. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth and steadiness of his presence. "I never thought I would find someone who truly understands me," she said softly. Jacob took her hand in his. "I've spent years alone," he replied, "but now I see that life is better shared. You've taught me that there's strength in trust, in kindness, and in letting someone in." Clara smiled, feeling a sense of completeness she had never known. She realized that the love and acceptance she had longed for were not distant dreams. They were here, in the man beside her, in the town that had begun to welcome her, and in the life she was building with her own hands. Their days continued in this rhythm of work, companionship, and quiet joy. Clara discovered a newfound sense of purpose in helping Jacob and contributing to the ranch, while also supporting the town in small but meaningful ways. Together, they built a life full of shared responsibilities, laughter, and mutual respect. Challenges came, as they always do, but they faced them together, knowing that they could rely on one another. The seasons changed, and with them came small celebrations: harvest festivals, communal meals, and evenings by the fire under the stars. Clara and Jacob shared these moments with each other, and with the town, feeling connected not only to one another, but to the community that had slowly become their extended family. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the rejection and hardships that had strengthened her, and for the love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the fields, Jacob turned to Clara and spoke softly. "Clara, you shine brighter than the sun," he said. "Your courage, your kindness, your spirit, it all lights up this place. I've never met anyone like you." Clara felt her heart leap. She had long struggled with self-doubt, with the pain of rejection, and with the fear of never belonging. But now, in Jacob's eyes, she saw affirmation, admiration, and love. She realized that her journey had brought her to someone who truly saw her light, someone who valued her entirely for who she was. In the quiet of that evening, with the golden light fading into twilight, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. She had been through hardship, faced judgment, and learned to rely on herself. And now she had found acceptance, partnership, and love. She understood that life's challenges were not punishments but lessons, shaping her into a person capable of deep connection and enduring happiness. Clara looked at Jacob and smiled, feeling a warmth that filled her entire being. The journey that had begun with rejection, uncertainty, and loneliness had led her here, to a place of belonging, to a life filled with purpose, and to a love that burned as brightly as the sun itself. And in that moment, she knew that she had found the home she had been seeking all along. The years had passed quietly yet richly on the small frontier town and Jacob's ranch. Clara had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident with each passing season, and the bond between her and Jacob had deepened into something enduring and steadfast. Together they had faced the storms, the hardships, and the small struggles of everyday life. And through it all, they had built a partnership founded on trust, respect, and love. Clara often reflected on her journey, remembering the young woman who had arrived by train with nothing but hope and a fiery head of red hair. She had traveled so far, faced rejection, and endured loneliness, but she had arrived here, stronger, valued, and cherished. The town that had once whispered about her hair and questioned her place now accepted her fully. Neighbors smiled warmly as she passed, children waved, and even the skeptics who had doubted her strength began to treat her with respect. Clara realized that her acceptance in the town had not come from trying to fit in or changing herself. It had come from staying true to who she was. Her courage, kindness, and determination had quietly reshaped the opinions of those around her. She had discovered that the world would accept her not by hiding her light, but by letting it shine. Clara and Jacob's life on the ranch was a rhythm of work, companionship, and quiet joys. They rose early to feed the cattle, mend fences, and tend to the land, finding satisfaction in each task completed. They worked side by side, laughing and joking, sharing stories, and supporting each other through difficult days. Clara often marveled at the way Jacob approached life, calm, steady, and thoughtful. His patience and resilience had taught her much, and she in turn had shown him the strength of kindness, optimism, and persistence. Together they had created a balance, a harmony that made even the hardest work feel meaningful and rewarding. One autumn morning, Clara woke before the sun had fully risen. She slipped outside into the cool, crisp air and watched the fields glow in the soft light of dawn. She saw the frost on the grass and the mist rising from the river, and she felt a sense of wonder at how far she had come. It was easy to remember the fear and uncertainty of her first days in town, the rejection she had faced, the lonely nights at the inn, and the quiet longing for someone to see her as she truly was. But now, standing in the early light with the world quiet around her, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had endured the trials, and they had led her here, to this life, to this love, to this home. Jacob appeared at the edge of the field, his figure outlined by the rising sun. He smiled when he saw her, and Clara felt her heart lift. "Good morning," he called, his voice warm and steady. "I see the sunrise beats me to the fields today." Clara laughed softly. "I wanted to see the land wake up," she said. "It's beautiful. It reminds me of everything I've learned here, everything we've built together." Jacob joined her, and they stood side by side, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. There was a quiet peace in the moment, a shared understanding that the life they had created together was a reward for all the struggles they had faced. They had found strength in each other, comfort in companionship, and joy in shared work. Clara felt a deep sense of belonging she had never thought possible when she first arrived in town. The town continued to grow, and with it, the lives of Clara and Jacob intertwined more fully with their neighbors. Clara became known not just for her distinctive red hair, but for her wisdom, generosity, and unwavering spirit. She helped organize small events, assisted with births and illnesses, and offered guidance to young women arriving in town. She shared her story openly, not with pride, but with honesty, showing that resilience and courage could turn even the harshest beginnings into something beautiful. Jacob remained a steadfast partner through all of this. He respected Clara's growing role in the town and encouraged her to take on responsibilities that allowed her to shine. He recognized that her strength was a gift to their community as well as to their shared life. They continued to work together on the ranch, tending the animals, mending fences, and planting crops. Each challenge became an opportunity to learn from each other, to support one another, and to strengthen their bond. One evening, after a long day of tending the fields and checking on the cattle, Clara and Jacob sat together on the porch of their cabin. The sky was painted with the deep purples and oranges of sunset, and the air was filled with the quiet sounds of the countryside. Clara rested her head against Jacob's shoulder and sighed with contentment. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said softly. "I never thought I would find a place where I belong or someone who sees me for who I am." Jacob wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "You've brought light into my life, Clara," he said. "I thought I was meant to be alone, but you've shown me that life is better when shared. You make this place brighter and warmer. You've made it a home not just for yourself, but for both of us." Clara smiled, feeling tears of joy prick her eyes. She realized that her journey had come full circle. The girl who had arrived, rejected and uncertain, had grown into a woman who was respected, loved, and valued. She had learned that strength was not just about enduring hardship, but about embracing one's true self, finding courage in vulnerability, and allowing love and companionship to flourish. As the seasons passed, Clara and Jacob continued to thrive. They celebrated small victories, the harvest, a healthy herd, successful repairs on the ranch, and faced challenges together with patience and determination. When storms came, they worked side by side to protect their land and animals. When the town faced difficulties, they offered help and guidance. Clara and Jacob's partnership became a symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation, respect, and love. One winter after the first snow had fallen and blanketed the ranch in white, Clara reflected on how far she had come. She had survived rejection, endured loneliness, and faced uncertainty, but she had also discovered resilience, independence, and the joy of shared life. She looked at Jacob, who was tending the animals in the soft glow of lantern light, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Together, they had built a life that was full, meaningful, and deeply rewarding. The townspeople, too, recognized the couple's contributions. They admired Clara for her courage, determination, and kindness, and they respected Jacob for his patience, strength, and steadfastness. The two had become pillars of the community, showing that true value lay not in appearances or first impressions, but in character, actions, and heart. Clara's red hair, once a source of rejection, had become a symbol of her uniqueness, her resilience, and the light she brought into the lives of those around her. In the quiet moments, Clara often thought back to her first days in the town, the fear, the rejection, and the loneliness. She remembered the despair she had felt at being judged for something as simple and natural as her hair, and how she had feared she would never belong. Yet she realized that those difficult days had shaped her into the woman she had become. They had taught her the value of perseverance, self-respect, and hope. Without them, she might never have appreciated the life she now lived or the love she had found with Jacob. Clara and Jacob continued to look to the future together. They dreamed of expanding the ranch, perhaps even building a small schoolhouse or helping new families settle in town. They talked of raising children, teaching them the values of hard work, kindness, and courage. They imagined a life filled with laughter, companionship, and shared dreams, a life built not just on survival, but on love, respect, and joy. One spring morning, as the wildflowers bloomed across the fields, Jacob turned to Clara and said, "You've always burned brighter than the sun, Clara, and now that light has made a home for both of us." Clara felt tears fill her eyes as she took his hand. "And you've shown me what it means to be truly seen, truly valued," she said softly. "Together, we've created something beautiful. I never imagined life could feel this full and warm." In that moment, standing together in the soft glow of spring sunlight, Clara knew that her journey had led her exactly where she was meant to be. She had faced rejection, endured hardship, and discovered her strength. She had found acceptance, love, and a place to call home. The girl who had once arrived by train, unsure and afraid, had grown into a woman who was respected, cherished, and deeply happy. Clara's story became quietly known in the town, a tale of resilience, courage, and love. She inspired others, especially young women, to embrace their true selves and face challenges with strength and optimism. And through it all, she and Jacob continued to work, laugh, and dream together, building a life filled with purpose, joy, and love. A life that shone as brightly as her fiery red hair under the sun.